Okay. Sports Buffet interview, Dave Mabry. And I didn't mess up his name, I think, and that's a good thing for me. Different interview, and we're not going to talk about one game, but we're going to talk about a lot of games. And quick question before we get into that. I nailed Mabry, correct?
Correct.
How many people have not nailed it in time?
There's been a few. there have been.
I'm going to guess you get Mayberry most often.
Yes.
Okay. And when did this start and stop?
It actually has stopped probably in the last 10, 15 years. For whatever reason, I reckon, everybody's phonetics are better. But it has stopped in the last little bit. But, I mean, I used to get it a ton, especially from working with media, with football, everything, and all that a lot of times.
So you're doing something a little bit different, a little bit unique, and I think a lot of people probably have wanted to see something like this at all times, and it's going on a YouTube channel. Kind of lay the foundation of what's going on here real quick with the old high school football games.
Well, what happened was when I moved back into the New River Valley and I moved into Giles County, I went to the school. I coached at Nares High School for 15 years, and all the coaches there are former players of mine. The principal's a former player and all that. And they were showing me around the building, basically, which nothing has changed. And Kelly Lowe, the head coach and athletic director, he opened up one of the closets. He said, "Look in there." And I looked, and I saw all these canisters of 16 millimeter film, which, I mean, my eyes just got big because just the history of the district that I grew up with, the New River district, I just saw it all flash before me. And I said, "What do you have planned to do with that?" And he said, "To be honest, it's been sitting there. Those have been sitting there for years." And I mean, they had a ton of videotapes and the canisters, and I was more concerned with the canisters, 6 millimeter. And I said, "Do you mind if I go through and take some stuff and try and digitize?" And I was going to do it just to get it done and preserve it, because the history of Nares High School was huge in football. And, Harry Ragsdale started the program here and was the coach from 1928 to like 1962 was his last year. And all of a sudden I looked, well, there's the 1960 season on the 16 millimeter, and my eyes just got bigger and bigger. I said, okay. So I brought boxes, and I just filled up boxes and brought them to my house. And I sent off about 10, 12 at a time to get them digitized. And I was very, very, very surprised at the quality of the film that I got back. And I mean, we're talking films that were from 1960 that are as old as me.
Yeah.
And the quality was unbelievable. And I mean, Harry Ragsdale, his son Steve, who, most high school football fans know, coached at Giles High School for a lot of years and won a bunch of state championships running the single wing offense. Well, Steve got that offense from his dad. That's what his dad put in at Nares and ran forever. And Nares ran single wing up until the mid-70s. And just to have all that on film. Well, then I got the idea, the history of the league. Let me talk to some other coaches and stuff. And long story short, I called Radford High School, and their history is far and wide under, Norm Lindenberg and all that. And they let me go through their film stuff. And it was like, I was like a kid in a candy store at that point.
Right.
And Blacksburg High School, the same thing. And it was just a history of the district that I grew up with. And then I got to see, I mean, I even stumbled on films where I played when I wasn't hurt, and all that. And I stumbled on to old Hillsville High School, which is Carroll County High School now. 1963, 1964, and their quarterback, they're throwing the ball all over the place. The quarterback's a dude named Frank Beamer. So he's
I
throwing
think I've heard of him.
Yeah, and he's throwing the ball everywhere. And actually, I talked to Frank back in February, and he was telling me how his coach, Tommy Thompson, would go in the summers to the Baltimore Colts training camp and sit down with Don Shula and Johnny Unitas, and they would talk passing game. And the way Frank was telling me, he said, and it wasn't just Tommy getting passing game information from it wasn't just Tommy getting passing game information from them. It was they wanted to hear what Tommy had. Tommy would lead them with stuff and ideas too, which I found very interesting and all that. But long story short, I didn't mean to go off on some other things there, but I just said, the stuff is sitting in schools' closets.
Yep.
If the schools were fortunate enough and smart enough to keep them. And I thought, well, somebody's got to do it. So I just started sending them off and all that. And I pick out games that I want because I can't afford to do it myself.
Right.
So I just started picking out games that meant a lot to me when I was a kid, or that I might have played in, or that were big games that I knew about, or anything from like the 1960s.
And even like a GoFundMe or something though, to get, like for people that want to see more.
I've tried to sort of put it out there a little bit. I don't have that reach.
I'll do what I can for you.
That's where I'm hoping, a lot of people will catch on to the YouTube site and everything, and then maybe help with that. Because I can do more, because I guarantee you, Nearest High School has a million, well, not a million literally, but just a ton of film. And then 2 weeks ago, I went ahead, I built up enough of a library that I started putting games on YouTube.
Right.
And what I found out, I really enjoyed that. Downloading it, I've never done a YouTube site before, or had what they call a channel.
Yep.
And then writing a description. And I also have like the Roanoke Times archives. So what I would do is I would go back, I would use that Four Seasons football site, and I would get the date of the game, and then I would go to the Roanoke Times and go to that following Saturday, and then get the write-up, and then I would read what happened in the game with names and stuff, and then write out a little synopsis on each game that I post. And I found out I like doing that, actually. So, and I look forward to doing it. And it's just a way for me to preserve some history that a small group of people like, that basically made my life, helped make my life as far as what I ended up doing for a living and what I've enjoyed and still enjoy to this day.
And you broadcasted with Kyle for, I don't remember how many years it was on WKD. What was it, 3 or 4?
It was right at 5.
Okay. That was close.
Coach Sharness had retired, and I think Dennis had come in with Kyle for a year.
Yep.
And Kyle had asked me that year, and I really didn't want to do anything at that point in time. And then Kyle hit on me that next year. And
I had the pleasure of one game with you, I think. Just one, I believe.
Yeah, we did
more than one.
We did one of the COVID spring games.
Yep, Nelson County, where we couldn't see the scoreboard.
Exactly.
So, well, and I think you got a taste of it right there. The YouTube channel, if I'm not mistaken, is Three Rings Football?
Three Rings Football.
Okay. So, and I was going to ask, did Kyle ever insult you when he was doing games with you? Because if not, I'm probably going to right now.
I'm sure he did. We trade cards every now and then.
The thing about it is, with college and pro, you have a lot more history. There are books, blah, blah, blah. With high school, the people that you want to talk to about older stuff, I mean, they're getting older, and eventually they're going to be dead. So,
Right.
who do you talk to? And I think that's another reason, like, why what you do and everything, I'm not going to call you a dinosaur, but the older generation has to teach not only your kids, me, other people, hey, there was football before the 1990s. There was basketball. I know you're just doing football, but there was a ton going on before you came to high school.
Exactly. Exactly. And the thing is, and with me, what I'm doing relates directly to me.
Right.
It's my history, which started as a kid. I had an older brother that played at Christiansburg High School in the late 60s, 68, 69. I would hang around at practices. I was that kid that was always around. I had the sisters that cheerleaded and everything, and I would end up hanging around, listening to the old school coaches cussing everybody out and all that mess, and watching my hapless Blue Demons, who I love dearly, but, always getting hammered. And then, I'm watching your district teams play and this and that. And that's why this region especially means a lot to me, because it influenced me, basically it helped make a career decision for me when I was 8 years old.
Right.
And, to me, that history is important, for the people of this area. And,
right.
It'd be the same if Bob Albus all of a sudden goes on a mission and all of a sudden starts knocking on doors at, Glass and at
right.
Heritage
right.
and, all those schools and say, hey, what do you have in these closets?
Well, and I think too, the thing too that gives you just as much credit as anything too is, if I ask you a story about a football game from, and I'm just going to go 1980s per se, if you were there, you can say, well, I was there and I saw it. I watched the old shows, which I know you've been clamoring through as well. I believe Friday Football Extra and stuff. Most of us just saw highlights. So we saw 3 or 4 plays before a television station left, which
Exactly.
can sometimes not be that much.
Exactly. Yeah. And, you get snippets of it and everything. It's like I said, it's just a regional thing and what you grew
Sure.
up with, and I grew up near River Valley, so that was my big leanings toward that. What I heard of Lynchburg, I always heard when I was younger about the big tight end they had that played with Tim George and all that crew, Fitzgerald, Mickey Fitzgerald, at Glass and stuff like that. I didn't hear the name when I was younger. I didn't hear the Charles Haley name that much.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Because he played at a single A school at the time.
Right.
So single A didn't make, the local news and everything in those days. Now all of a sudden single A to 6A,
Sure.
everybody's getting covered now.
Yeah, and it's funny because, the greatest player to me, and I'm just going to pick on a school real quick, in Rustburg history, to me, is Danny Davis.
Yeah.
I never saw Danny Davis, and I'm saying that. So, I think some people, we go off the people that we trust and that were there and that know the game, because the stories of just a guy like Danny Davis, and I know we could get into a ton of people, the stories of what, people are, it's almost like they're unicorns. They're legendary.
Yeah. And when you say Danny Davis, when I go to Radford High School and I'm looking through Mikey Crisp, and of course his dad was a legend at Blacksburg High School.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
But I coached with Stephen at Alta Vista, Mikey's brother and everything. So I know the Crisp family fairly well. And Mikey had let me in that closet. And of course, one of the first things I'm trying to hunt for, you mentioned Rustburg and Danny Davis. I'm trying to find the 1987 state semifinal game between Radford and Rustburg, which I was at that game. I went to that game, and Danny Davis with the red shoes, and I'm thinking Radford's just going to run all over Rustburg, as Bill Pattison here, legendary coach here at Narrows, used to call it. They were in the semi-hole district. Said, I don't know much about that semi-hole district, but they got to be good. And Danny Davis ran nuts on them. And Russberg ended up upsetting Radford. And I was trying to find that game, and of course, that game I could not find.
Well, and for me, it's weird because I've gotten to talk to Mark Lenenberg a few times, who obviously is the son of Norm, who's a legendary coach at Radford. Radford's got a ton of history. I hear about it a lot too, with being with Dwayne, and Dwayne's good friends with Mike Christ and so on and so forth. But if you ask me, my first memory of Radford is when Jefferson Forrest would play him. I want to say in 91, 92, somewhere in there, and touchdown Tommy Edwards. Mm-hmm. Who is probably, this is a knock against him, but if people say Radford of the longer term people are probably not going to ring that name first, but it comes to me first.
It comes to you.
You know what I'm saying? So,
and that's exactly what you're saying. That's why you've got to preserve that earlier history, because if you don't, at some point it will be completely lost. And those tapes will be the ones that get thrown out because there's no interest, and there's nothing there.
I was just going to say, don't get me wrong. I want people's opinion too of the new people, and I know, again, not to make fun of you or make you sound old, but you've spawned decades to where you've seen, a Danny Davis and you've seen a Juan Thornhill. So you've seen, God knows how many players in your time. So people like you are great because you can comment on, 40, 50 plays, to where you've got some people who might be able to comment on 6.
Yeah. And the thing is, too, and that's the other thing, is the perspective end of it. We tend to make, and it's a good thing, it's probably not an accurate thing, but I think it's a good thing, is like you were talking about 1991, Jefferson Forrest, Radford, this and that. You were probably how old at that time?
12.
Okay. When you're 12, 11, 10, 9, 8 years old, 13, in that age range, everything is bigger.
Yep.
And if you remember it 20 years later when you're in your 30s, nothing was as big or as good as what you saw that day in 1991. It's hard because we tend to make things bigger, and I'm the same way. The 1971, 72 Radford teams, I've always said, are the best high school football teams I've ever seen in the state of Virginia. But that's also coming from an 11 and 12-year-old mind that watched them. And now that I've got it, now I have a chance to sit back and watch those teams on film.
Sure.
And watch them as a coach and watch what they're doing and see what they're doing, and then compare to, because I also feel like that I was a coach of one of the better single A teams in the history of the game, in the history of the state of Virginia, in 2014. Along with the Powell Valley teams from deep Southwest Virginia. So, and then you start comparing those in your mind. But, we always tend to make those things we saw when we were younger bigger, and hard to beat in our minds.
Why do you think we have the Jordan versus LeBron argument? Why do you think we have all these arguments?
Basically, so people like you and I can sit back and argue over stuff,
Right, but the same thing, like we said.
Yeah.
Go ahead. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt.
Just term it as conversation.
Yep.
I say argue, but conversation, and it ends up being an argument. But that's what sports is in general when you sit and talk about it. So
obviously you were a kid because you couldn't be as old as you are now if you weren't a kid. But you've been a kid /fan /coach /player as well. How much did you really get to, quote unquote, watch kids when you were coaching them? Because you can't just sit there and, obviously you got to coach one of the better ones ever, Juan Thornhill, but you can't really just it's not like watching a game on Saturday or Sunday. You can't just sit there and watch him.
Like for a lot of those players, a lot of those Alta Vista players, for me, and that was a little bit, I had a little bit different perspective than like Coach Sharnes or Coach Revis or Coach Close.
Mm-hmm. Right.
In that I knew those kids from the time they were in pre-K. So I'm watching them I'm watching them grow up. I'm watching them every day in PE class from the time they're that young and watching them play at any type of sport, and then all that. And then, and then when you coach them, I understand what you're saying there. You're more worried. You're not necessarily watching the kid per se, but what I've had the pleasure of being able to do now in the last 10 years that I've been retired. What year did I retire? 17. 17 I got out of football, and then 20 I retired. So I've had a chance to rewatch games, which I still enjoy doing. I'll sit back and I watched the other day. I sat and I watched the Franklin game from 2012, which was the one where we went to Franklin when Thornhill and Meechie and the Johnson twins and all them were sophomores. And we went to Franklin and were basically intimidated by a big physical ball club. This was in the regional championship game. And I rewatched that the other day. And I sat and I watched every play. And I'm sitting there and I'm watching individuals play. More of what you were asking, I think, and getting able to see and appreciate what they were able to do. And
were you on the box or on the field when you coached, by the way? And on the box with the top?
Box.
Okay.
I've
been you can see a little bit more there sometimes. Go ahead.
Been a box coach for most of my coaching career. I've done the sideline a few times when, like early on, when Coach Sharness was trying to figure out where we wanted everybody and why. So early on, you have a game or two where you're on the sideline and this and that. When I here at Narrows in my first run, I was up top, and it's just for me, the sideline's way too hectic, way too hectic for me.